Guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board where we bring in experts in the franchise community to give you insights and share their experiences so you can build brands that will last and will thrive. I've got with me Johnny Francis today, or Johnny Franchise, if you know of him that way. It's funny because I think it's like episode 115, Johnny, and I've had you on my list for like 4 years. I don't know how I've not landed you here before. So thanks for making time, and
Yeah.
sure appreciate you being here with us.
Well, you're welcome, Dave. I appreciate the opportunity. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, guys, let me tell you why Johnny's here. And then, Johnny, I'll give you a chance to tell us a little bit more about yourself for those who've been living under rocks for a while and don't know who you are. Uh,
Sure.
so Johnny's he's kind of a Swiss Army knife in franchising. If you don't know, he wasn't born into it, but he was raised in franchising. Parents started a barber franchise, which grew incredibly. And he was the youngest of five. So he's kind of been in franchising this whole time growing up, and about 35 years now. And so he started when he was five, just so you know. Don't let the white-haired deceive
Yeah.
you. But one of the things I love about Johnny, guys, is that he says, I love the way he said it. He says he's not a know-it-all, but he's a share-it-all. And he really does have that persona. If you meet him at a conference, if he's not on his way to give a presentation, he'll pretty much sit in the hall and talk to anybody and share and answer their questions and help them figure it out. That's Johnny, I love that about you. I met when the very first time I met you, I recognized that. I appreciate you being willing to come here and share some things with us today. But two other fun things about Johnny you ought to know. Dad, he's a girl dad, got two girls, one just graduated college, one's going in. And Also is the founder of, if you haven't heard of it before, you should check it out, Father's Eve, fatherseve.com. They created a holiday to help celebrate dads, which I appreciate. So, Johnny, tell us a little bit more about you before we jump into our topic.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dave. Yeah, I grew up in a franchise system. I thought everybody owned their own business, two or three businesses. I thought everything was a franchise, and I got exposed to a lot early, and I got the chance to work really hard for a long time as a teenager and in high school and in college and afterwards. I got to get involved in our family's franchise of hair salons and barbershops, and it was quite a run. We had a great business for a long time, and we sold that business. We had 1,000 stores, and we sold it in 1999.
Wow.
So 25 years ago, we sold out. This was before private equity was a big deal in franchising. That was a
Mhm.
big deal back then, and it would be a bigger deal even today. But
Yeah.
I like to say that was my first retirement, right? I was 32 when we sold the business, and it
Wow.
was a great outcome for my family and all of our franchisees, really everybody. It was a pretty great deal. My parents are recognized in the IFA Hall of Fame, which is pretty rare for husband and wife to be in there together. Because
Yeah.
my dad started it, and then after he passed away, my mother doubled it and really created a fantastic business. And it's not just what we did, it's how we did it. So
Mhm.
I really did learn franchising done right or done well. And that's how I approach everything. That's what I'm used to, right? I thought
Mhm.
everybody did it that way. So
Yeah.
after we sold, I went on and did five more brands on my own as a franchisor, as a franchisee, as a developer, and all kinds of experience. And I guess I'm not much of a startup guy. That's
Mhm.
kind of not my thing. I'm more of a fix it, grow it, scale it, and sell it guy. So I'm
Mhm.
better at helping take a good concept and make it a lot better.
Mhm.
And I like to see everybody win. When the franchisor does their part, the franchisees do their part, and the suppliers do their part. When everybody's paying attention and in alignment, man, everybody wins.
Yeah.
And that's why I love franchising. So I'm very comfortable on any part, any size, any shape, kind of any situation. I just love seeing franchising done well.
Yeah. Yeah, as you should. It is kind of it's like well there are a lot of things when you see athletes or performers or especially when they're teams and you see everybody just kind of like lock into step. It's almost kind of a beautiful business model. I hate to say that. That came up in another podcast with a founder, but there's something beautiful about the model and how it really creates a triple win and four
Yeah,
wins if you consider even like the supplier partners that are involved in it. It can be
for
a
sure.
full 360 win.
Man, I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen it firsthand. And I love it, and I want to see more of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's what we're talking about today, right? Like one of the parts, one of the aspects that can be really difficult about franchising, right? And I talk to brands all the time. They're like, and I've been in a franchise brand where sometimes the franchisor and the franchisee relationship wasn't wasn't as calculated and wasn't as deliberate as it should have been.
Yeah,
And you've been through this a ton. Like, can you share with us, John? Let's just start kind of laying the topic out. Like, why is it
sure.
so important that franchisors invest in these relationships? How do they impact the business?
Well, it's really everything in franchising. It comes down to people and relationships.
Hmm.
The franchisor is dependent on the franchisee, and at the same time, the franchisee is dependent on the franchisor. So when that relationship is fully developed or at its peak, it's what you call interdependent, right? They
Hmm.
really need each other to be mutually successful, to be a combined success in the brand. So franchisors have a unique obligation and a unique opportunity. They generally get to pick the people or approve or award the franchise or however you want to phrase it. It's up to them to really control the flow and the quality and the degree and the volume and the type, the kind, and all the different factors of who is in the brand. It's up to the franchisees to operate and
Hmm.
execute and contribute and be constructive with their criticism
Yeah.
and be aligned and committed to a mutual success. And the franchisees have to do really the heavy lifting is on the franchisee, but it wouldn't happen without the franchisor. They have to go
Right.
first. And once both sides kind of understand how important the other one is, I think that that relationship really evolves to a better, higher level of that interdependence. A
Yeah.
lot of people have written about this. I mean, this is not a secret. It's to me, it's fundamental.
Yeah.
Uh, but a lot of people forget sometimes. And when I go into a brand, and if I start hearing the us versus them kind of language,
Hmm.
you got to stop that right away, call it out, and point out why that is just a dangerous mindset to have. You really have to have the franchisor and franchisees working together to be successful together.
Right. Yeah, and you talked about the us versus them mindset. Like what are some of the things, like let's say I'm a franchise or I'm on the executive team. What are some signs that I might have a gap between this relationship or like a shift in that relationship that isn't positive?
Well, I think it starts with blame,
Hmm.
right? People like to blame other people for what's wrong. The franchisor likes to blame the franchisee. Well, they're not doing it right, or they're stupid, or they don't have enough, or whatever. Franchisee likes to blame the franchisor. Well, their system stinks, and I don't get the support I need, and I'm going to figure it out for myself.
Hmm.
So that's maybe an easy, obvious indicator. But when you start blaming the other side, you're in trouble
Hmm.
because there's always enough blame to go all the way around. It has to come all the way around, and it's really has to be, well, okay, let's not figure out who caused the problem. How do we solve the problem? And what
Right.
can I do to be my part of it? And what can you do on your side of it? Both
Mhm.
sides have to understand that. So and that might be an obvious thing, but I think a lot of people forget. So when a franchisor or executive team member is saying, that franchisee just doesn't get it.
Hmm.
Well, that may be the case, but let's make sure that's the case. Let's go talk to that franchisee and set them down and have a meaningful conversation.
Yeah.
Sometimes their frustration or their lack of performance is just a symptom of a different problem.
Mhm.
And a lot of times the cause of that problem is really from the franchisor, and the franchisee is simply responding to what's happening to them or what's happening in that brand,
Mhm.
and it's missing. A lot of
Yeah.
times it's training, training, and training are kind of the first three things that usually I look at. And then it's,
Yeah.
there's more to it than that, but training
Yeah.
solves a lot of problems in a brand, and it's continuous and ongoing. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes, especially these startup emerging brands I get to talk to, they get all revved up and they launch and they do an onboarding program and then they turn them loose. And the franchisees are supposed to just go and do it, but they don't realize that the training and support needs to be continuous and it needs to evolve and change as that franchisee is growing up in the brand. They need different things at different times.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
a lot of new franchisors really just don't understand that. They said, oh, yeah, they went through training. They should be good. I said, well, no, they went through the first training. That's part of it. What about the
Yeah.
next training? What about, what else can we do for them? So it's support and training really kind of fundamental, and that's on the franchisor to provide that, but it's on the franchisee to adopt and implement and execute. So it really is that interdependent relationship
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've seen hundreds of examples of this. When you're working, is the thing that keeps coming through my mind, because my wife and I own franchises, is yeah,
Mhm.
they were fairly new, and I knew that getting into it, and there was a lot of time where I was like, man, oh man, like I just we realized like, oh, we didn't really know how to do that. We just figured it out. We didn't know how to do that. We figured it out, and that's not meant to be critical at all. It's just the symptom of a new franchise system because they ran
Yeah.
the business model for a while, but they didn't think about all the intricacies. They often the players, the best players, are the worst coaches. And because
Yeah,
they don't know how they learned the muscle memory to swing a bat properly, right? They just do it. And
right.
often it's the guys that are looking at it from the outside that are the best coaches, and they're often not the best players. So how do you
Right.
how do you help franchisors start to recognize the gaps and fill in the training gaps? Because that's really a core part of making a successful business operate in franchising.
Yeah, yeah, I think it is. Well, I guess my work, I do that through questions. I ask a lot of questions and ask the kind of questions that makes the franchisor really a little uncomfortable because that's usually where you learn something new is when
Yeah.
you realize, "Ah, I don't know." And then I can point them in the right direction and help them
Mhm.
discover for themselves where that gap is. So it's asking questions and really it's understanding the why, the theory of start with why. Well,
Yeah.
that's pretty accurate for a lot of things in franchising. And so
Hmm.
when a franchisee is what we would say misbehaving or out of compliance, right? You ask the question, why is that? Well, usually the why is it's a symptom of a deeper problem. The reason they don't do it right is because they don't know how to do it right. And the
Yeah.
reason they don't know how is because they weren't trained. And maybe they were trained, but maybe it was incomplete or inconsistent or too long ago that things have changed and they've learned to adapt or adopt and they're going to figure it out. Well, you don't want franchisees trying to figure it out. You want franchisees to implement and execute. It's the franchisor's job to figure it out and train that franchisee and provide them the tools and the support and the ongoing
Mhm.
training so the franchisee doesn't have to figure it out. They just have to implement and execute. Now, when the franchisee finds a better way of doing things or a new idea, a new product, a new service, a new marketing strategy that really works, the franchisor should be looking for that
Mhm.
and welcoming those innovations and new ideas and bring that in and polish it up and distribute it across the whole brand. Constructive evolution happens in a
Mhm.
brand when things get better. I say we reserve the right to get smarter, right? And that goes on all sides, right? We can do it better and they can do it better. But if we work together, we'll all do it better. So it has to be collaborative, it has to be aligned, but it takes a lot of work. And
Mhm.
it's a lot of people just don't understand the commitment they make when they franchise their business or when they buy a franchise. They don't
Yeah.
understand the commitment that they're making into that brand. And I'll take it one step further, Dave, and talk about franchisees working with other franchisees.
Yeah.
I've
Please.
been the franchisee, the new guy coming into an existing brand and saying, I want to learn everything I can. So I'll go through all the training from the franchisor, take everything they'll give me, but then I'll go work with, I say, ask the franchisor, who are your top five franchisee of the year, the last 5 years?
Yeah.
And I'll go spend a day with each one of them because they've figured it out. If they're franchisee of the year, they're probably
Right.
doing a lot of things right. So you can learn from other people in the brand, even if the franchisor doesn't have all the answers all the time, which is we're human beings, right? We're going to make mistakes. Another franchisee might have the same information interpreted into their local business, their market, and you can adopt and adapt that and bring it to your own market. So learn from the brand, not just the franchisor.
Yeah, I want to go back a second because you're highlighting a couple of really key things, and I don't want the audience to overlook them.
Sure.
Right. The first one is that well, if we can build a healthy relationship where the franchisees and franchisors trust each other, there's enough system and process and training happening that the franchisees can be successful that there needs to be room in that model for the franchisees to innovate as well, right? So
Right.
because some of the best ideas, most of the best ideas, once you've launched, actually come from the daily operators, which shouldn't be the franchisor. You have a couple
Right.
of corporate stores, test things out, but often the real super, I always say the superpower of franchising isn't the model. It's actually the independent entrepreneurial people operating within the model and discovering ways to make it even better. That's what the
Right.
superpower of franchising is, I think. So,
Yeah.
how do you, so as I'm a franchisor, I've got franchisees, I'm training them, I'm giving them resources. How do I foster that innovation without creating a total nightmare of compliance issues, right? There's a
Yeah.
fine balance there. What have you seen work really well?
Yeah. Lots of communication, certainly active listening, careful communication. An advisory council is a tool that can be used to channel a lot of those innovations and make sure they get sort of captured and addressed carefully, because not every idea is a good idea.
Agreed.
Um,
Yeah.
and so you have to have some qualification around it. I think other ways is, the in-person conferences is really where the best relationships and the most connectivity happens. I mean, you can have lots of phone calls and meetings, and we can do Zooms all day long, but when you're physically together and maybe a small group or a large group, that's where the best ideas and the
Mhm.
real-time collaboration can really happen quickly.
Yeah.
So I think those creating those environments for meaningful communication, and that goes
Mhm.
both always,
Yeah.
not just one way, but listening and sharing and being open. Listen to understand, not to respond. You know,
Mhm.
that's a hard thing for a lot of people.
Yeah. I agree
Um,
with that.
I think that might answer that question.
No, I think it does. As you say that, I'm listening to respond and not listening to listen. So I got to be careful as a as a host here.
Yeah,
Uh,
well,
great, it's
yeah,
great content though. You mentioned franchise advisory councils. Let's
yeah,
talk about those for a minute because this is where a lot of magic happens. I've been on one before. I've worked with many of them before. People are
yeah.
looking to roll out technology. Often the smart brands I find involve their FACs
Oh, for
to
sure.
bless and vet and also test things out in pilots. So how
Yeah,
have you seen brands? Can we start with a negative example? Like how have you seen
sure.
brands misuse or underuse their franchise advisory
Oh, yeah, I've helped launch advisory councils and I've helped fix broken advisory councils.
communities?
So when they're broken, is when people don't want to go to the meetings.
Mhm.
I mean, that it's boring, or they meet too often, too frequently, and there's really nothing to talk about. So they make things up, or they get wound up on the same thing over and over and over,
Mhm.
repeating topics. That's not effective. So when the advisory councils don't work is really when they're unstructured. That's a problem.
Mhm.
There's no accountability. That's a problem. And there's really unclear expectations. That's a problem.
Yeah,
So when an advisory council is structured properly and managed properly, it can become very powerful. I call it a secret weapon of franchising.
yeah,
A franchise advisory council that's organized and utilized properly is a powerful tool to help improve the system and really gives the franchisor the feedback and input and uh, just the perspective of the franchisee in a meaningful, consistent way. And the franchisor, or the franchisees, it gives them a chance to know that there's a structure for this sort of stuff that bubbles
yeah,
up from time to time. FACs can sometimes be a grievance outlet when someone's got a problem or a
yeah.
complaint. Hey,
Hmm.
that guy's bothering me and I got an issue. It could be a corporate staff, it could be a franchisee who's gone off the reservation. I mean, it could be a lot of things. And a FAC can deal with those issues. There's a
Yeah,
lot of growing pains in a franchise system, especially when they're growing fast.
yeah,
And I get called in sometimes when things are going wrong, and it's like, well, do you have an advisory council? How does that work? Can we use that advisory council as a mechanism to really get to the bottom of the issue and then communicate and collaborate together with the franchisees in a meaningful, consistent way. So an advisory council can really add value. The best time to have one is before you wish you had one. So I would say put it in
Yeah.
place when things are calm, right? You
Yeah.
don't start an advisory council when you have a mutiny on your hands and people are hostile or angry or violent about some change or some problem or some situation that you're not addressing. You want to put a franchise advisory council in when things are relatively calm and people are okay. And it's like, yeah, now we're growing. I tell franchisors the time to do that is typically around 50 units, maybe more, maybe less. I mean, it depends. I would
Mhm.
say when you forget the names of all your franchisees, when you don't know them all, like you get to the point where you can't know all your franchisees, you
Mhm.
better have an advisory council by then. So before that is when you
Yeah.
want to have an advisory council.
Yeah. Well, let's take a step back because you mentioned a couple of great things, great insights there. It's like having an insurance plan or a line of credit. Like you don't go get those when you desperately need them.
Right.
You get those way beforehand, so you can dictate the terms and have them when you actually need them. Um, franchise. So you talked about grievances, right? Or trying to have somebody there to bounce ideas off of and help grow. I see a barrier a lot of times, and I
Yeah.
just want to share this, and you address this. Tell me how a brand struggling with this can grow out of the mindset. But I see brands that they don't want because there's this constant angst of, well, I'm paying you royalties. What are those royalties for? I see that pressure create almost a wall where franchisors and executive teams are afraid to expose their soft underbelly and not have everything all figured out perfectly all the time.
Yeah.
And yet, when I see that they've opened up and said, "Hey, this is great. We're all operating this model. We don't know how to solve this." They show the vulnerability.
Right.
Actually, that makes it work better typically. But
Right.
how do you help a franchise brand who's struggling with that what's infallibility faux pas in their head? How do you help them
Yeah.
overcome that and realize that this can actually be a real asset to you to help you figure out the problems rather than trying to figure them out on your own and then maybe deploy something that doesn't fit?
Right. Right. Well, it's a really good question, Dave. I would, the first thing that comes to mind is mindset. The franchisor has to have the mindset of long term,
Hmm.
very long game. They got to play the long game. So this brand is going to be around for a long time, 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years, long way. You're not going to have all the answers at every point of inflection or
Yeah.
the growing cycles of a franchisor. They go through cycles just like anything. So first you got to have the mindset that we don't have to have all the answers, but we have to have the commitment to do this in what is a mutually beneficial approach. If you're trying to squeeze another nickel out of every franchisee, they're going to sense that and they're going to resent it and you're going to regret it, right? So
Mhm.
that's a short-term greed motivated franchisor. That's a problem.
Yep.
If you've got the long game and you're truly committed to your franchisee's success, long-term success, you have to obsess about their performance for their benefit first. If the franchisees are profitable and they can see a path to growth
Hmm.
and you've given them the tools and the techniques and the systems and the training and training and training, right? Once they understand that you're committed to their success, they're going to give you grace when you make a mistake or when things go wrong or you bump into a problem and hey, we didn't see that, now we see it, so now we've got to deal with it. So you have to be a bit vulnerable, but really committed. And
Hmm.
then you have to be willing to communicate and listen and share ideas. The franchisor doesn't give away decision-making authority to franchisees. That's not what an advisory council does. Advisory council does not vote. They do
Hmm.
not approve. They are there to listen and share and understand and provide feedback and perspective so the franchisor can get it right, get
Hmm.
it better, get it faster, and hopefully help those franchisees understand how difficult it is to be the franchisor. It's
Yeah.
hard work and it's
Hmm.
very difficult. And you've got a lot of people relying on the franchisor. When you're the founder or the chief whatever officer, they're counting on you to get it right. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure. And franchisees sometimes forget that, right? Oh, he's just there for the job. He's not really committed. Well, don't assume anything, right?
Yeah.
Have the conversation, get to know each other, build that relationship and trust. But when a franchisee is going off the rails or something's really wrong, the franchisor has to call it out and address it. I like to say the franchisor's job number one is to protect the brand. And sometimes you got to protect it from itself, right? If I've got a franchisee over here who's doing something crazy stupid, I have to get in there and stop that or deal with that. I owe it to everybody else who's
Mm.
invested in the brand and everybody else who's going to invest in the brand in the future. I'm thinking about franchisees who are coming in 10 years from now. They're
Yeah.
not even here. But if I screw this up now, I'm going to reduce the opportunity for that franchisee in 10 years. Think about that opportunity. So
Yeah.
the franchisor has to be focused on doing the best they can with what they have at any given moment. Nobody has all the answers all the time. That's unreasonable and unrealistic. But
Yeah.
they can have an attitude and a mindset of commitment and mutual success. That can stay in place the entire time. That's what makes a franchisor successful.
Yeah. No, you're right. And it's funny because so often, especially I think as private equities come into franchising, too many people see it as, ooh, like I can, in 2 or 3 years I can, walk away and buy an island and it changes the way people think about the brands rather than
Yeah.
I'm going to be here for 45 years until I retire or die and my kids are going to probably work in the business and like those types of brands, they have a special sort of staying power and the culture of those
Yeah.
brands has been built around longevity and built around integrity. And I'm not trying to dog
Yeah.
on any brands right now at all. So please
No,
nobody try to read
I
between the
think you're
lines.
right. Man,
Yeah.
I've seen a lot and I've worked with a lot of stuff. Private equity is not all bad and
Mm-mm,
it's not
no.
all good either. I mean, there's certainly advantages and disadvantages. But what happens sometimes is they bring in an attitude of greed.
Hmm.
And I think that is a slippery slope. When people are focused on just making more money all the time,
Yeah.
they lose their true motivation of mutual success.
Yeah.
And it oftentimes changes the culture in a brand. Oftentimes it changes a lot of the key players in a
Yeah.
brand, change the founder sells most of the company and they're out the door. If they can stick around and they can still have influence and still drive that culture and values, that's when franchise private equity really works best.
Yeah.
But it's not all bad. Sometimes I've seen companies that needed to sell because they needed a turnover at the top, and that private equity
Yeah.
transaction allowed that to happen. So they were really better off, and when everything changed. But that's not always the case. So it's hard to
Yeah.
say that
Yeah.
there's any one right answer. I think there's a lot of right answers. But yeah, it goes back to the original concept of long-term thinking and commitment to mutual success.
Yeah.
I think that's when franchising really works.
I agree with that 100%. Especially from a guy who's been in it and seen it right from the inside out, both
Oh
ways.
man,
And
yeah.
Johnny, these are great and timeless, I think, points of advice. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you, man. I could do this all day long. I love franchising and I love to see people get it right. And sometimes, the things we're talking about are big concepts and kind of broad brush. But when you bring it down into a particular brand or a particular situation, that's when you really have to understand more about that particular, because they're
Hmm.
not all the same. And I've seen and done a lot of different things, but every time I get into another brand, another situation, I need to understand the specifics of how did you get here? And who are the people and what were their expectations and how did that go wrong? And
Hmm.
then what are the possibilities to fix it? I can usually find more than one way to fix a problem, but you got to take all the variables to find the best way to solve that problem.
Yeah, no, you do. Johnny, I know that our time was a little short today. We should probably get together another time soon and dive
Yeah,
deeper into a few more topics together. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to reach out and say, "Hey, Johnny, I got an issue with an advisory counselor. I need some
sure.
help with my Zorzi relationship building or anything else related to what we talked about." How should they reach
Yeah.
out to you?
Well, thanks, Dave. My name is John Francis. My nickname is Johnny Franchise. So that's my website, Johnny Franchise. I'm not hard to find. I'm on all the social media. I've got a contractor that makes me look good online. I show up at conferences. I don't do them all anymore. I do a lot of them, but I'm not hard to find. Johnny Francis, Johnny Franchise. I ask anybody. I think I've been around it for so long. I feel like I'm the old guy now, and which is great. I don't mind. I'm happy to share. And I say, people, just give me a call. If you hit my website, there's links and buttons and schedulers and all that. But my phone number is there, and you can call. If I'm not talking to someone, I'll answer the phone. Right? If I'm not already talking to someone else.
Yeah.
So I don't mind. I love talking to folks and trying to help. And then I like to say, I'll send you an invoice if you deserve it, right? But that's it. I don't mind sharing ideas and just getting familiar and I love to be a resource. My website, I've been writing a monthly blog for like 10 years. There's a ton of stuff in there, and I forget sometimes what's in there, but it's searchable. I had it made searchable, so that's kind of cool. I love being a resource to anyone in franchising.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you being a resource to us today, Johnny. Thanks again for your time, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. You're welcome. Thanks. I appreciate it.